Hey guys, AJ from Char here. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the difference between work boots and hiking boots. You know, sometimes it's super obvious this is a work boot, this is the hiking boot, if we were to say which is which. But sometimes those lines can be pretty blurred. For example, like these two here, this is from Keen and this is from Keen. One's a hiking boot, one's a work boot. So, we get asked a lot, like, can I use my hiking boots, the hiking boots for work? Can I use a work boot for hiking? The answer to both those questions is yes, and it kind of depends on what you're doing or what your goals are. So, we got a lineup of some different boots here, and what I'm going to do is use those to give examples to kind of demonstrate what separates a work boot from a hiking boot. Even though sometimes the lines kind of blur in terms of, when you're just looking at the shoe itself. So we'll go over some features. We'll go over some different characteristics that hopefully make it a little bit more clear why we call one a work boot and why we call one a hiking boot. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to hiking boots versus work boots is some of the characteristics you'll see in something like the outsole of the boot. The outsole is like the bottom, the part that comes into contact with the ground. So right here we have a work boot and a hiking boot, and these are both from Keen. So we have Keen Utility and then the Keen Outdoor line. And if you get in here with the camera, I want to show you some of the differences here. So right here, we've got a work boot. And as you can see, this sole tread pattern is a little bit different than the hiking boot tread pattern. So on the hiking boot, you'll notice it's deeper lugs and a little bit more aggressive. On the work boot, you'll notice it has some lug depth to it, but it balances some of that aggressiveness with some bigger, flatter areas. So on a hiking boot, the reason typically you see a more aggressive pattern on average for the tread is all of the use for this is intended to be on natural terrain, like mud, grass, rocks, dirt. Where in a work boot, the understanding is you might be in mud and grass and dirt, but you also might be spending a lot of time walking around hard surfaces like macadam or concrete. So what that flatter, broader tread will do on a work boot on macadam and concrete is extend the life of your boots. Think about the fact that your entire body weight is being distributed over a smaller surface area here, where it's being distributed over a wider surface area here. So some work boots do have very aggressive tread, and they're designed for outdoor work in mud and whatnot almost exclusively, but a lot of your work boots are gonna have this varied tread that's gonna give you a kind of more well-rounded approach to your traction and to your tread wear. So the shape of the tread pattern is one factor that you really want to pay attention to help identify the difference between a hiking boot and a work boot. The other thing I want to talk about regarding the outsole, and I just swapped out for this other boot because it's a little easier to see, is oil resistance and slip resistance. So some of these ratings for oil resistant or slip resistant, hopefully you can read it. It's pretty kind of blends in with the sole, but it says that it's oil resistant, slip resistant here on the outsole. Those ratings you will find on a lot of work boots. You'll almost never see the sole of a hiking boot say oil resistant or slip resistant. That's not to say that a hiking boot is not oil resistant and slip resistant outsole. It's just not tested for that. So in a work environment, they're expecting you may encounter some different chemicals, or you may need that slip resistance on a hard surface, say like a tile floor. And because work boot manufacturers want to make sure that they're able to sell their boots to the people in the correct occupations, they're going to actually go through the testing that allows them to then print that on the sole. So it could be the same rubber compound in some cases on a work boot versus a hiking boot. Not usually, but even if it was, oftentimes the work boot will be tested for oil and slip resistance if they want to put that advertisement on the bottom saying it is. A hiking boot, you're rarely, if ever, going to see it say oil resistant or slip resistant because they're just not concerned with testing for that. People are wearing them out on the trail, not on the shop floor. So we talked about the outsole, like the tread differences, oil resistant, slip resistant. Work boots are going to have more of those certifications. Hiking boots, they're just not worried about putting that on there. Another big difference you'll see, for example, these two boots from Keen that we talked about earlier. One's a hiking boot, one's a work boot. Well, the materials that they use on the boot itself are oftentimes going to be a little different. Usually, in a work boot, you're going to have heavier duty materials. So beefier leather, a heavier duty outsole, like the rubber is a little bit higher carbon content for wear resistance, that's not because hiking boot people want their shoes to wear out or anything like that. It's because work boot manufacturers understand that a lot of times this is what you're gonna spend 5 days a week, 40 hours a week on your feet using them every single day, so they need to have a little bit more resilience if they're gonna get you through. Hiking boots, there are people that hike every single day for miles and miles, but for the majority of the people, that weight savings is more important than having a super duper durable shoe. So in general, hiking boots tend to skew towards helping you save some weight while still getting good support and grip and other features. Work boots, they want to find a balance that also incorporates a little bit more durability. And in this case, that usually means that the materials are going to be a little bit heavier. So the next shot, we're going to cut to the scale, and I'm going to show you the difference in weight between these two boots that look really similar. Right here on the scale, we have a Keen Targhee. So this is a pretty popular hiking boot from Keen. This is a Keen Targhee size 10. And if you can read the numbers on the scale, this right shoe here is coming in at 480 grams. So that's the weight on this shoe. I'm gonna switch over now to a Keen Detroit, which is a really similar looking shoe. If you just look at it from the side profile, of course you can spot some cosmetic differences, but overall it's a pretty similar, same height, similar profile shoe. We're at 667 grams here. So this shoe is almost 50% heavier than that Keen Targhee. They look the same. Honestly, when you put them on, they feel kind of similar. You'll notice though, this one's gonna be a little bit stiffer and it's a little bit heavier. So that's owing to the heavier duty materials. Usually work boots are gonna have thicker rubber. Sometimes even the cushioning, whether it's polyurethane or EVA, is a little bit denser and heavier. And again, that outsole rubber oftentimes is a little bit denser, harder rubber. That's because the work boots, they're meant for daily wear every single day. And people want them to last. The hiking boots, you're trying to stay comfortable on the trail and hopefully carry less weight. A lot of things that have to do with hiking and backpacking are about shaving weight. So even a heavy pair of hiking boots oftentimes will be lighter than a moderate weight pair of work boots. In conclusion, guys, you've seen that there are some significant differences between work boots and hiking boots. So although sometimes it's super obvious which one's the work boot and which one's the hiking boot, as we've seen, sometimes the differences are pretty small in terms of aesthetics. It's really about how the shoe is built, what type of materials it's made with. So, final parting thought, can you use a work boot as a hiking boot? Could I go hiking in this? Absolutely. This might be a little bit stiffer and require more break-in to be comfortable on the trail, but at the end of the day, it's not a bad boot to go on a hike with. Would it be my first choice? Probably not. I'd much rather be in something a little bit lighter weight, more flexible, more comfortable, that's designed for the trail. Likewise, you can totally use a hiking boot as a work boot, obviously if it's approved by your job. If you have an occupation that requires like a safety toe, for example, it's not gonna fly. But let's say you're, a painter or something, or you're installing, trim in a house. Usually those types of jobs don't require a safety toe, and you'll be fine. Pick whatever makes sense for you, whatever's comfortable, because at the end of the day, comfort is what's key. And the features that you see on these boots, the reason they're designed the way they are, is to make them as comfortable as possible for their intended use, and as effective as possible for their intended use. So the difference between a work boot and a hiking boot, there's several. At the end of the day, what's right for you depends on your specific needs. So if you have questions, if you want to try any of them on, feel free to stop by, pay us a visit here, and we'd be happy to help.